Well, it finally happened. The R6 overheated. But it wasn't my fault. Let me explain. Well, hello my friends. If you do not know who I am, my name is Tony and I am a filmmaker photographer in the St. Louis area. This channel does a ton of videos on the EOS R system in general. I do a lot of tutorials, I do a lot of gear reviews, so make sure to subscribe and hit the alert button to know when new videos are coming for your camera. Alright, let's talk about the R6. We're talking about overheating. This is something that I haven't talked a lot about on my channel because I've never actually had my R6 overheat until a couple weeks ago, and I didn't do it. So let me explain what was going on. I was in South Dakota riding my motorcycle, having a good time on vacation. I get a text message that they overheated my R6, and I was like, how's that even possible? I've never overheated it. I've shot long weddings with it. I've done all sorts of things. Hours and hours and hours on the R6. So I started asking what they were doing, and they were filming an interview with a bunch of police officers, and it went really long. They had the camera in the sunlight on a slider so that it was a nice, small, automated, lightweight setup. Well, eventually, if you just let the R6 run and run and run, it will overheat. So, what I want to do is give you guys some practical tips. I've kind of thought through, okay, so why has the R6 never overheated? I've literally never even seen the overheat light. And I shoot all of my vlogs, like what we're doing right now, in 4K, 24, C-Log. I think we're shooting C-Log 3 today. And, I just get really great quality, and I never have problems with overheating. So I want to give you just a few different tips on some of the things that I do to keep my R6 from overheating. And honestly, I think if you do these principles, it will make you a better filmmaker regardless. Now, do not fear. If you've got an R6, do not fear video on this camera. It is incredible. The quality is so good. It looks so great. And like I said, I don't have trouble with it overheating. And so don't fear using video on this camera and never use it because you're afraid that it's gonna overheat on you. Bottom line is, if you use the camera the way that it's intended, you're gonna have really good results. Now, what I mean by that is no camera is perfect. Even if the R6 never overheated, it's not going to be the perfect camera because I'm going to be missing video-centric buttons. There's no there's no built-in ND filters. There's no such camera. And as soon as you get into a camera like that, say the C70, C200, then it gets really big and bulky. It's not as easy to use on a gimbal. You have other trade-offs. It doesn't take still photography. There's no such thing as a perfect camera. And so what you need to do is you need to decide what are the strengths that you want in your camera. And for me, the R5 and the R6 are incredible cameras. All right, so let's get into it. That's enough rant. Let's talk about keeping your R6 from overheating. First thing you want to do is look at some of the settings. Make sure that overheat control is on. You'll find that, I think it's in the red menu. Just kind of flip through there. It comes with it on. Leave it on. What it does is while you're shooting video, as soon as you hit stop recording, the camera internally, without changing any of your settings, lowers the video quality and frame rate to optimize your camera from not overheating. I know it's kind of tricky, but the camera does all the work. You don't need to worry about it. And so then as soon as you hit record, it bumps back up to 4K, whatever your settings were. That will help your camera, and that was in a firmware update. I think it was maybe 1.1 or 1.2, somewhere in there. But they've done a lot of stuff to kind of extend the range of your camera overheating. And what that does is a lot of times if you leave your camera running, even if you're not recording in 4K, it will overheat because it's just constantly processing all that data. Well, overheat control helps with that. Let's talk about a couple other settings. I record in 4K 24. I shoot in 1/50th for my shutter speed. Aperture wide open because everybody loves blurry backgrounds. And then if you're shooting in log, you want it at 400 ISO, or if you're shooting in C-Log 3, you want it at 800 ISO. So if that image is too bright, then you need to put an ND filter on your lens to help bring that exposure down to where you need it. Those are the settings that you need to be using for video. What else do I do? As far as other settings, that's pretty much it. What else you can do to help though is control your environment. Now that's not always possible, but if you can, shoot an environment that's not 100 degrees. Keep your camera out of direct sunlight. I know if you're shooting a wedding or you're outside, it's just impossible. And I've shot videos that are 45 minutes non-stop without the camera overheating outside in direct sunlight. It just really depends on so many different variables. But if you can, control that environment just a little bit. Other thing that I do is when I'm not using the camera, say I am shooting a bride getting ready, I do not need 3 hours of her getting her makeup on. In fact, I don't want that. So when I get my shot, I stop the recording and I turn the camera completely off. That lets the camera breathe a little bit. It doesn't have to process anything. It just cools down a little bit. Get in the habit of turning that camera off when you're not using it. This is really easy for run and gun. If you're trying to line up shots and stuff, just flip the camera on, get what you need and turn it off and make your adjustments. Just get in the habit of conserving your battery. There's nothing wrong with that. All right, what else do I do? I also open up the screen. Like right now, the screen is flipped open so that I can see myself. But when I'm recording, say, some sort of B-roll, I'll open up the screen. That lets the camera breathe just a little bit more. Now, that one's not entirely scientific, but give it a shot and see if that helps if your camera's overheating. All right, what else do I do? You can try shooting in an external monitor. I'm not a huge fan of this because it just makes your run and gun setup very big and bulky. But a lot of people like using a Ninja 5. You got a much better screen to see what you're doing. You've got all sorts of recording options. You just run HDMI out, and that will prolong the recording life of the camera. Now we use these cameras in a studio via external recording, and they don't overheat either. So there's all sorts of ways to kind of get around it, but you can try using an external recorder. For me personally, that just doesn't work. I don't like having that big bulky screen on top of it. I know a lot of people disagree with me, so give it a shot. Maybe rent one from Lens Rentals or something and see how it works. All right, let's talk about a couple more settings that might help you. They just released in I think 1.3.1 or whatever it is, IPB Lite. So what that means is there's multiple different kinds of 4K files. All I is the highest quality, and it's not even available on this. The highest quality is IPB. But I personally do not record on my R5 in all I anymore. The only times that you would ever see that advantage of having all I is if there's a lot of fast movement happening within your frame, and most of the time that's just not my style of shooting. I'm not dealing with most of that. I'm dealing with people who are kind of slow. I don't film a lot of race cars or rushing water, things like that. If I am, I'll switch it over to all I, but for 99% of the time I'm using IPB, and I never have any trouble at all. IPB is a little lighter version that they released that makes your file sizes smaller, and it also kind of helps a little bit with some of the overheating things I have heard. I haven't used this a ton yet, but it's worth a shot. Give it a shot to see if it works. Also, your file sizes will be smaller. So like the way that I would do that is if, say you're a wedding videographer, I do a lot of weddings, so that's why I keep referencing them. All day long you can shoot an IPB. Once you get to the ceremony that's going to be 30 minutes plus, flip it over to IPB Lite. That lets your camera work a little less, and it makes your file sizes smaller. Give it a shot, see if that'll work. Other thing you can do is if you're shooting a long ceremony, and this is what I do a lot of times, I don't need it 4K. I can use 1080. I'm going to deliver to them in 1080. If I need to, I can upscale it, and the bitrate is so good on these cameras that it'll handle it just fine. But those long form wedding ceremonies, sometimes 1080 is just good enough. You will not overheat in 1080. So if your camera's starting to get warm, you could flip it down to 1080, and that would get you by until you've got some time to let your camera breathe a little bit. That's an option. All right, what else do we got? Other thing, this is one that's a little subjective, but I do this all the time. And it's basically simply just don't overshoot. What I mean by that, let's go back to that bride getting ready. I do not need 3 hours of girls getting makeup on. I need 6 to 8, 12 shots maybe that are incredible, but I do not need 3 hours of coverage. So once you get your shot, stop shooting. Now, there's times when you need to run longer, but for the most part, stop shooting your footage when you've already got the shot. That's just the difference between somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. I have to work with this with my second shooters a lot. They just constantly think that they have to keep shooting, keep shooting. There's other things that you can do on a set besides shoot just random B-roll. So make sure that you're prepping the next sequence. Make sure that you're building relationships and talking with your client and making sure all of that is going fluid. Make sure that you're ready for the rest of the day. When I'm on a wedding set, I'm constantly moving and preparing for that next shot, making sure that once she gets her dress on, the room is clean and my camera is cooling down because it's off and it's chilling. I'm not really missing anything because I've already got the shot and I know that. So get confident with what you're doing and don't overshoot. Now, there's times when you're gonna have to record for long segments, and I get that, but you as a videographer can learn when you need to shoot and when you don't need to shoot. That's the same with events. That's the same with any kind of really run and gun. Now, if you're making short films and videos, I don't have a lot of experience with some of that narrative stuff. I know that what you have to do is you get your shot and then you start switching the set, and you need the camera to be able to kind of see what it looks like in frame. Well, what I do is I just turn it off, and then once I have things basically where I want them to be, then I will flip that camera back on. I don't do a ton of those kind of videos, and honestly, this camera might not be the best for that style of shooting. Same with long form interviews. If you're going to be shooting an hour-long interview, this camera isn't the best for it anyways. Like, you don't have some of the features like XLR preamps, all of those kinds of things. You may want to look at a C70 or a C200, pick one up used. It's not going to be that much more expensive than the R6 and a lens. So, lots of ways that you can help. Hopefully this video kind of helped you think through some of the things that you're doing with your R6 if you're having trouble overheating it. Like I said, I am a professional videographer. It's what I do. People pay me to make videos, and I use this R6 for my run and gun style. Now, we also use the C200. We still use the C100 Mark IIs. Those are great cameras. We rent the C70 a lot. We've rented the C300s. We've rented the C500s. It all depends on what you want to do for that job. But for the most part, this R6 is our basic run and gun. If it's on a gimbal right now, we're using the R6, and it works really well. All right, guys. Well, if this video was helpful, make sure to like it. Leave comments in the comment section with your questions. I know you've got them, and I know you've got thoughts. So let me know what you think down below, and I would love to help you work through some of that stuff. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.